Here's a mouthful. On May 27th, a 3-judge panel of the 6th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals decided 2-1 to grant an injunctive halt to Joe Biden's March-enacted Small Business Administration handout of $28.6 billion.
We hold the world ransom for $100 billion.
Through the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. I'm sure George Mason would just be delighted.
Calm down, diddly 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 diddly. They did their best, shoddily diddly diddly diddly. Gotta be nice, hostility diddly diddly diddly. Ah, hell, diddly ding dong crap! Can't you morons do anything right?
It's all part of the so-called American Rescue Plan, and one judge called it racial gerrymandering. But this isn't actually something to celebrate, because in so doing, they gave liberty-minded Americans a superficial Pyrrhic victory, found in a poorly based suit and the court's own blindness to not only the enumerated powers of the Constitution, but the 14th Amendment as well. I'll go through it so we can carry with us some intellectual ammunition. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC-TV, and the New American's Veronica Kirilenko unpacks the fundamentals about this Tennessee restaurateur's 6th Circuit win against Biden and the appealing verbiage from some of the opinion, and how that verbiage hides gross errors in both the plaintiff's approach and this superficially satisfying victory. Quote, "The ruling involved the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, a $28.6 billion program in the COVID relief law President Biden signed in March. The law requires the Small Business Administration, SBA, to give priority to restaurants owned by certain minorities and women, while bumping white males and other minorities to the back of the line. The court has decided that showing favoritism to small restaurants at least 51% owned and controlled by women, veterans, or the, quote, socially and economically disadvantaged, end quote, is a violation of the 14th Constitutional Amendment Equal Protection Clause. And they decided along these lines because the plaintiff's legal representatives argued along these lines. Adds Kirilenko, the ruling was in response to a lawsuit brought by the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty on behalf of Antonio Vitolo, a white Tennessee restaurant owner whose application for relief was not being processed until minority and female applications were fulfilled. After a trial judge denied his request for an injunction, he appealed to the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals, which granted him an injunction in a 2-1 vote. And Kirilenko also provides the pertinent text of the 14th Amendment, its so-called Equal Protection Clause, which is worth studying here because evidently neither the judges of the 6th Circuit nor the attorneys arguing on behalf of Mr. Vitolo are very animated to focus on those words or on what is or is not granted as a power for the feds by their vaunted Constitution. As Kirilenko notes, the 14th Amendment reads in part, quote, "No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." Now, curiously, anybody who has suffered under a lockdown could sue the government based on the Due Process Clause. But this is not the foundation of this lawsuit. The foundation of this lawsuit is based on the so-called Equal Protection Clause. So right away, we have a problem. And this isn't a problem that excuses or allows Biden's insane plan either. The 14th Amendment not only cites the states, not the federal government here, but it also focuses on equal so-called protection. Now, as I've noted before, the disbursement of government handouts to people is not protection against other people. Americans have become so accustomed to government giving people things, so-called, from schooling to welfare handouts and on, that many believe that states have to hand out money and special favors to people equally. But handouts are not what was meant by the 14th Amendment, because it's focused on what was understood by the founders and many generations following to be the so-called role of government. And that was to protect people from other people. If someone wanted to describe state lockdown edicts as attacks and frame a suit against the state for damages, as I mentioned, under the Due Process Clause or other clauses of the Constitution, that's a different matter. And given the long history of states claiming sovereign immunity, unfortunately, the chances of winning such a case would probably be slim. But that doesn't mean that the 14th Amendment can be misread to make it A, apply to the feds, or B, apply to welfare handouts, even to people who have been screwed by their state or city governments. So again, what we have here is a Pyrrhic victory, wherein the majority ruled in favor of someone who was treated unfairly. Yes, absolutely. And wherein one judge even offered potent language about the supposedly racially inclusive Joe Biden administration's actually engaging in racial gerrymandering, as he called it, of the funds. Quote, Judge Amul Thipar's opinion in Vitolo v. Guzman begins with a simple and straightforward description of the case and holding. Quote, this case is about whether the government can allocate limited coronavirus relief funds based on the race and sex of the applicants. We hold that it cannot, end quote. And adds Kirilenko, quoting Thaper, quote, the stark realities of the Small Business Administration's racial gerrymandering are inescapable, Judge Thaper states, slamming the, quote, scattershot, end quote, manner in which the Biden administration decided which races to prioritize. But again, it's extremely important to stress that all of this racialism is dark window dressing on a much larger issue. An issue bigger even than the fact that both the plaintiffs' lawyers and the majority on the Sixth Circuit completely and utterly misread the 14th Amendment. It's that there is absolutely zero enumerated power granted to Biden or Congress or anyone in the federal Leviathan to hand out cash to anyone suffering from the effects of lockdowns. And yes, they have suffered greatly. The power simply isn't there to hand them cash. Now, some sophists try to point to the so-called General Welfare Clause of the Constitution, but that was written to be read in conjunction with the enumerated powers only. And if anyone can be targeted by the feds to have his or her money taken in taxes or inflation-based borrowing to later be paid in taxes by future generations, then no one is safe from the government. And in fact, the general welfare is actually undercut by government predation forever.
You wanna go? Here we go.
How you doing?
Now, some might say that as long as the Biden plan is shot down, what does it matter if the judges rule by misreading the Constitution, focusing on misinterpretations of the 14th Amendment, or overlooking the fact that the power to hand out the green isn't there at all? Well, it matters a lot if one calls himself or herself a constitutionalist and bothers to vote to put people into the offices that that constitutional document imposes on us. Unbelievable what's going on here. People hear that there's a victory against Biden and they celebrate it, but they gotta look deeper and recognize the lessons that they can learn from this to carry on and hand out to friends. Hey, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Please join us at mrctv.org. That's mrctv.org. Remember the website. Tell your friends about it, please. We'd really appreciate it. We'd love to see you over there. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure that you like and subscribe. I'll see you in the comments section as well. And if you have the opportunity, head to Rumble, because that's the safety backup. And of course, Rumble is really doing great work, so we want to promote them. They're wonderful, and they don't censor the way some video platforms do. Yeah, you know what we're talking about. That happened last week to us. So we had to be very careful, and anything that's super controversial, we got to watch out, because the Grand Meisters at you-know-where might go after us. So Rumble is the great backup, just in case. And also, you'll find us on Twitter, on Facebook, on TikTok, and on Instagram. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.